How does the US political system work, and what is the legitimacy of the US led Western criticism of China, particularly in view moral and legal contradictions in the Western narrative?
If you look at the history of international orders, not order, rather orders that we have seen uh, over centuries, rather, it's always like a competition for influence through narratives. Narratives are developed based on the ground realities or not so much ground realities of a particular country. What we have seen coming out of NATO or other Western alliance countries about one man or dictatorship or one man rule or rule by certain individuals. Of course, nowhere in the world it is accepted as the government of the people, for the people, and by the people. Uh, Even though every country has its own justification and they have their own definition of that. If you go to China, China have their definition of the same uh, topic, that is governance. If you go to Russia, they have theirs. If you go to Saudi Arabia, they have theirs. And if you come to America, here also we see that uh, the conversation and the belief is that the government is by the people, for the people. But the big question is how far, just like you mentioned. Uh, there's a conversation, debate going on for decades in the United States to reform the political system, reform the political process, remove the weaknesses in the process, and strengthen the U.S. democratic model, and that's what we are seeing, and that's why there's a lot of conversation about money in politics in the U.S. because one billionaire comes up and he or she may have a lot of money, and they don't need people's donations, and they just pump the money into the media landscape and be part of the headlines and may garner some support as well. And many people question that. Is this really a democracy? Because then in this case, this democracy is for sale because the highest bidder is coming, throwing the money. We saw, I think Michael Bloomberg spent $600 million on his presidential campaign. And many people at that time questioned, not, I mean, of course, it was purely legal, but how ethical it was. Because in American democracy, you can be or you can run for any office, and people will give you the money basically, and the government gives you matching grants, and that's how this system works. And that's why these political reforms, election reforms, electoral college that we have here, again, it is very questionable that why popular vote is not counted and why electoral vote is counted, and why a person like Al Gore had one popular vote and he lost in 2000. So we have those examples, and that's why this conversation is going on. And then when you do the comparisons, like for example, if you do the comparison between Western, I would not call it a democracy. I would rather say the systems of governance that are in place in Western countries and the systems of governance that are in place in countries like China, Russia, Saudi Arabia, or other kingdoms and sheikdoms, where royal families have been running, like in Bahrain, for example. I think the royal family has been ruling for more than 100 years. So you have those examples. But every country defines it in their own ways. And that's why if someone is sitting in China or someone is sitting in Russia or in Saudi Arabia, they have a lot to talk about Western democracy, because they can come up with the same questions that common Americans have, that why my vote doesn't count when it comes to electoral college. Did I go to the polling station, spend my time, and cast my ballot in the hope that it will be counted? Yes, it was counted, but it was counted up to a certain extent. And that's where the problem arises. And that's where the debate is on. And I think that uh, if you compare the two or three or whatever systems we have, you have to check at the end of the day what that system is delivering, because that's what matters. The end of every system is me and you, the people. So if a system is benefiting you and me in ways that any free person aspires for or expects, then you can say that yes, this system is working. But if the system stops or limits my liberties or limits my prospects for progress and my pursuit for happiness, then certainly that system will have its own limitations.
With the sharpening of geopolitical divisions led by the United States and allies, their relentless pressure on China, where is the world headed?
The world is headed in wrong direction. Whether you are sitting in US or Europe or anywhere in the country, in Russia or anywhere, everybody knows that we are headed in the wrong direction. And everybody knows the reasons as well. I think that over the course of history, we have seen that two powerful elements that have shaped and reshaped history are geopolitical and geoeconomic interests. They are very closely linked. Essentially, it is economic interests. Even the colonizers who were all over the world because of their geoeconomic interests. They wanted to exploit, the resources of those countries, and that's what they did. Like rubber was, like the king of Belgium was controlling the rubber trade in Congo and other countries for generations. Why? Because they had their geoeconomic interests, and those geoeconomic interests really created the space for then, of course, geopolitics comes into being. But I think First and Second World Wars really sharpened the geopolitical interest, because that's where the competition, the great power competition for spheres of influence started, where two theories were practiced. Like in the West, the popular notion was that development is security. You develop more, you are more secure. And on the Soviet side, they would say security is development, because they said that if we create an iron curtain and we are self-sustaining, so nobody can defeat us.